Now, as we continue with our heritage feature on the program, we will zoom into language as a facet of our heritage. South Africa is a multilingual and multicultural society with 11 official languages. This diversity, of course, can somewhat create language barriers in South African schools that can hinder learning and affect the academic performance of students. So, how can South African schools address and remove the language barriers to create a more inclusive and equitable education system? Joining us now virtually for this discussion is Dr. Laurien Rosen, the director of the Eduvation Network. Dr. Rosen, a very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
First of all, Dr. Rosen, what role does language play in shaping a student's ability to learn, especially in a multilingual society like South Africa?
Well, language is critical to students' learning. Language is how the individual makes sense of the world.
Yes.
And so we have 11 vernaculars in 11 languages in this country, and we also have 12 if you consider the deaf language. Students need to be catered to in their languages in order to maximize their learning capacity.
Yeah.
It has been proven, and it is well known, that students do learn best in their own language. They're able to assimilate the knowledge being given to them together with what they know. And the results are far better when students are taught in their own languages.
We will get to the feasibility of that in just a moment. But to what extent do social and economic aspirations held by the parents for their children reflect a desire for their children to learn English as a second or additional language even?
Well, I think that desire is very, very present. The problem being that currently the way it is in schools is children are taught up until grade 3
Yes.
in their home language. And after that, mainly they go on and they learn English, and in some occasions Afrikaans. What happens if we teach children in their individual vernaculars is that when they get to a tertiary education standard, they will have to face English, because currently we only have universities that cater in English.
Yeah.
So the problem would come in how we standardize and how we decide who is university ready or TVET ready or whatever tertiary education path they decide to take. And therefore, parents do favor English as a medium of learning, despite how difficult and how it may increase the struggle of the individual learner.
You're quite right there. We're still yet to come across a university or a tertiary institution that teaches, in an indigenous language. So do you think that the current language policies in South African schools adequately address the needs of multilingual students? I mean, put simply, Dr. Rosen, just how feasible is multilingual education, especially for the technical subjects like maths and science, which have traditionally been taught and understood in English?
I don't think that the current policy in any way covers the needs of students to learn in multi-languages. But the Bella Bill attempts to address that. Unfortunately, I don't think anybody's worked out exactly how they're going to implement that. One of the suggestions through research is that teachers teach in their vernacular, and then students are kind of upskilled in some way in English so that they get the best of both.
Yeah.
That would allow the teacher to relate to the students far better and the students to understand the subject far better. But I do believe that there are nuances, especially in the technical subjects and also in languages such as English, that would be very, very difficult to explain in a language that's not English. Those concepts are conceived and they're difficult to translate.
You know, Dr. Rosen, you just mentioned the Bella Bill, but I would say at this point it's still a grey area, in terms of making pronouncements about the introduction of multilingual education system in South Africa. In fact, Clause 5 of this Bella Bill provides that the governing body of a public school may, subject to subsection 13, determine the language policy of the school subject to the Constitution, and provided that the language policy of a public school must be limited to one or more of the official languages of the Republic as provided in Section 6 of the Constitution. So it doesn't really address the issue of the possibility of the introduction of a multi-sectoral or rather multilingual education model to South African schools, does it?
No, it doesn't. But in reality, we can't go from 3 to 12. We need to progress. And it does make, the bill does make allowances for the SGB to determine some of the policies at the school. But the Bella Bill, in fact, is seeking to remove a lot of the authority of the SGBs and bring it to government level, because the government has recognized that there is inequity in some of the decisions made by the school governing bodies.
And how can schools then balance the need for students to learn global languages like English with the importance of preserving indigenous languages? I mean, what would be the most effective way to incorporate indigenous languages into the curriculum?
Indeed, if I had that answer, I would be able to revolutionize the entire school system in South Africa.
Yeah.
One of the tools that we can use is online learning. And at Eduvation, that's what we are extremely keen on, using online learning to overcome these obstacles. Because online you can learn in any language. There are many translations, apps available, and then there are places like the Eduvation Network where you are able to learn multilingually. And we would like to open ourselves to that new adventure.
And what about homeschooling? Do you think it could be, another solution?
Homeschooling is a very interesting topic. There are lots of pros and cons to homeschooling. Again, just exterior of the education system, there's a lot of social and psychological implications for homeschooling. But of course, homeschooling you would be able to homeschool in a vernacular, but then there would need to be standardized exams to determine the student's competence.
Okay.
And in what language would that exam be?
English. Most definitely English.
Probably, as it's a universal lingua franca.
Yeah. And what kind of training or even support do teachers need at this juncture to better navigate language barriers in the classroom?
Well, the teachers that are currently in the classroom definitely need professional upskilling, but teachers shouldn't be discouraged from approaching their classes in their vernacular. I think that it wins over students, and I think that it encourages students to learn because there's something familiar to work from. And the principle of learning is that we go from the known to the unknown. So if you have someone teaching you in your vernacular, it's easier to make that jump. The problem is if you take a cosmopolitan city like Johannesburg, we have so many people from so many cultures with so many diverse languages living in a space, and those schools are filled with those children. So the problem is not just how do we teach in a Zulu school. The problem is how do we teach in a classroom where we have Zulu and Sotho and French and English and Afrikaans. And that's the real problem.
And I suppose then the answer lies with the government, which through the Bella Bill has placed all the powers with the heads of department. Dr. Rosen, lovely chatting to you. Thank you so much for sharing your insights.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that is Dr. Laurien Rosen, the director of Eduvation Network, discussing some of the strategies that may be applied to dismantle the language barriers at schools.